Between the years 1590 and 1605, William Shakespeare wrote Sonnet 18, which was a part of his collection of 154 sonnets. In the poem, Shakespeare describes the image of a very handsome man, by comparing him to a summer's day. At the end of his description, he goes on to talk about how, although this handsome man will age with time, the depiction of him in the poem will forever remain the same. So, because of poetry, the man is eternalized. This idea is extremely important in poetry and in literature as a whole, which is what makes Sonnet 18 so important to us now. Before diving into the poem, let's look at what was going on in the time when Shakespeare wrote it. Shakespeare wrote the sonnets during a period known as the Reformation. The Reformation was the separation from the Roman Catholic Church and creation of the Protestant Church due to grievances that people had for malpractices in the Roman Catholic Church. Shakespeare highlighted many of the up-and-coming Protestant beliefs in his work, most prominently the idea that good trumps evil. Most of Shakespeare's literary works were a part of the Renaissance movement. This movement was characterized by the many new ideas flowing throughout Europe at that time. Most literature during the Renaissance movement was comedic, satirical, or theatrical. The common thread between the pieces during this period was drama, using over-exaggerated language or a disproportionate amount of literary devices to convey an idea. Sonnet 18 represents this era very well. Rather than describe the beauty of the man, Shakespeare likens him to a summer's day, which is pretty dramatic and theatrical. Now, what exactly is a sonnet? Well, the dictionary definition for it is that it's a poem of 14 lines, using 10 syllables per line, and using a formal rhyme scheme. But during the 1600s, a sonnet was so much more than just that. A sonnet was a way to convey your deep love and appreciation for someone. People would often outsource their sonnet writing to professional poets like Shakespeare, so that their lover would appreciate them even more. So there's a good chance that Shakespeare was writing the sonnet because he was tipped off, and he wrote it about someone else's lover. But if he didn't, maybe Shakespeare just had a really good friendship with one of his guy friends, and he wrote the poem to express that friendship. Or maybe Shakespeare loved this dude more than a friend, and was most comfortable with expressing this love in poetic form. While we can't be certain exactly why Shakespeare wrote the sonnet, it's interesting to keep these different perspectives in mind while we break down the poem. Now for the poem analysis. Shakespeare starts the poem with a rhetorical question: "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?" Which is then answered in the next couple of lines, where Shakespeare says that the subject of the poem is more beautiful than a summer's day. Shakespeare uses personification in the poem in the lines, "Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May," and "Nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade," and "Summer's lease hath all too short a date." He makes it sound like death is bragging, which is a human-like thing to do, and that the summer is signing a lease, which is also something that humans do. Giving these human traits to inanimate objects is especially important for this poem, where Shakespeare is comparing a man to an inanimate object. In the poem, Shakespeare also uses metaphors by saying that the summer is eternal and its glow won't fade. Furthermore, Shakespeare uses literary devices like assonance in the line, "Nor lose possession of that fair thou oust," with repeating ow sounds. He uses alliteration in the line, "So long lives this," and "two time thou groused," with repeating t sounds. And he uses consonants in the line, "So long lives this," and "this gives life to thee," with repeating s sounds. The purpose of these literary devices, assonance, alliteration, and consonants, is to add a rhyming and almost pulsing effect. A sonnet, after all, is a work of art, and these kinds of literary devices help bring out that aspect of the poem. So now let us perform scansion on Sonnet 18. So Sonnet 18 can be broken up into 3 quatrains and a couplet at the end. So 1, 2, 3, and a quatrain is just a group of 4 lines in a poem. And then a couplet, there's one couplet at the end, is a group of 2 lines. So this means that Shakespeare's Sonnet 18 has 14 lines total, because it has 3 quatrains and 2 couplets, and all of his sonnets follow this structure, the structure of an English sonnet. And this is different from a Petrarchian sonnet, which has 1 octave and 1 sestet. An octave is a group of 8 lines, and a sestet is a group of 6 lines. I also have the rhythm of the poem written here, the A, B, C, D, E, F, G rhyme scheme. And Shakespeare uses this rhyme scheme because it helps break up the poem into its quatrains and also just generally makes the poem more rhythmic. Then the poem uses, each line of the poem is written in an iambic pentameter. And we can make this out by reading one line of the poem and marking the stressed and unstressed syllables. So we have, shall I compare the two, a summer's day. So that line of poetry has 5 meters, and each meter is iambic, making this line of poetry an iambic pentameter. And, each line of this poem is written in the iambic pentameter, and each line of all of Shakespeare's sonnets are written in the iambic pentameter. And Shakespeare uses the iambic pentameter not only because it mirrors how English was spoken at that time, but because it mirrors the rhythm of the heart. And much of Shakespeare's literature is concerning the heart and romance, so this is only fitting. Having read this poem, I feel like I have a clearer understanding of what poetry is and what it means to me. Why take the time to read these antiquated pieces of literature that force you to think in order to extrapolate their meaning, when you could just watch a dopamine-inducing video in 2 clicks? It's because poetry allows people to pass the test of time. As long as Shakespeare's poem about this man being compared to a summer's day is read, that man will be alive. And he will only die when that poem is read for the last time. Thank you.